Hey everybody, welcome back to History Student Reacts. Today I'll be watching the craziest projects that were almost a reality from BlueJay. Now I have watched one or maybe two of his videos in the past. I know that he is very much in the vein of Salmonella, who we've been watching a lot of lately, so I thought let's check out some BlueJay. Now, before we get into this one, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave a like on this video, subscribe to my channel, and check out my Patreon, which is linked down below, and to give you access to regular exclusive content. Now, with all that out of the way, let's jump right into this reaction.
If humanity and suspended cartoon pianos have anything in common, it's their uncanny knack for failure time and time again. Whether it be a New Year's resolution or returning home with the milk, humans don't always accomplish everything they set out to do. But while these
And do we learn from our mistakes? Not usually. Sometimes, maybe.
goals can leave weight sets dusty or children with lasting psychological damage, sometimes the goal itself is so ridiculous that it's probably best left in the good old idea box. And in a world where people thought hydrogen airships were a good idea, imagine the zany proposals that didn't make the cut. Now let's take a look at some of the
We did learn from that mistake, I will say.
crazy. Is that a flashbang?
Go. Package secured, extracting now. I've got your 6.
The box, it's gone. Mother, they must have tracked our location. Timmy, what are you doing on your phone? I'm just browsing iFunny. Okay, we need to talk about that later, but you're on public Wi-Fi. You should be using NordVPN to hide your location. That must be how they found us. Who's they? No time, we need that box. This looks like British equipment. Luckily, the UK is one of over 60 countries NordVPN has servers in. Use it to change our location to London. Okay, what now? Timmy, they're Brits. How many miles is it to the royal palace? Actually, it's kilometers. You mean kilometers, right? Civilized people use kilometers. What's all this, you mean? There, go Timmy.
Actually, a lot of the rest of the world uses kilometers outside the United States, but in the UK, at least in terms of driving, they still use miles. So, UK mostly not the same as the US, but they are using miles instead of kilometers. So, just a little tidbit.
Anyway, NordVPN is a fantastic service that protects your personal information while going about online activities. And if you're hesitant, there's a risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. Head on over to nordvpn.com/BlueJay or use code BlueJay for a ridiculously huge discount. Thank you NordVPN for sponsoring the video. Oh, good. So as I was saying, let's take a look at some bonkers canceled projects.
You could do the bit with inches and centimeters, though. That'd work.
The people of 19th century London were not that different from us. They face similar day-to-day challenges that plague our lives today. But where we lose our keys, they lose their stable boy. Or instead of asking, where can I fit these groceries? They had, where can I fit these thousands of bodies? In the early 1800s, London was frantically searching for a solution for what to do with all their dead. Cemeteries were beginning to find themselves increasingly full. And seeing as how the residents weren't moving out, the lazy fucks, answers were desperately needed. And in 1820,
yeah, I mean, we're talking about 19th century London. This is a city that is rapidly industrializing, becoming bigger and bigger and bigger with the sort of urbanization of Britain generally with the Industrial Revolution. I mean, London is becoming this truly massive metropolis in this era, and that causes a lot of issues with the sewage, for example, with just the density of people generally. But one of the issues you might not have realized is that all the graveyards were filling up. At this point, early 1800s, you're still mostly using a lot of these old churchyards as graveyards, and there's just not enough room in them anymore for all of these new dead bodies. And so, you're going to have to come up with some solution. Where are we going to put all of these bodies?
architect Thomas Wilson came up with one such solution. Hey there, chap. That pyramid's rather neat, isn't it? You know what would make it better? 5 million bodies. At the time, London was going through an Egyptian craze, with artifacts pouring in from the land of the Nile, a topic that really deserves a video of its own. Influenced by this popularity, Thomas Wilson proposed the Metropolitan Sepulchre. This pyramid would have towered 94 stories on 18 acres of land, overlooking London on Primrose Hill.
Yeah, so the whole Egyptomania that was happening in that moment, you can actually trace that back to Napoleon's campaign in Egypt. Right? And we talked a little bit, in fact, a lot about that on our channel. Now, there are a couple of reasons Napoleon goes to Egypt, but one of them was to essentially discover all about ancient Egyptian history. he brings a lot of academics, scientists, historians with him, and they go into archaeology mode, right? Trying to find out whatever they can. Napoleon brings back a lot of information, a lot of artifacts. The British, of course, take the Rosetta Stone from the French, and they bring that back. And what this starts off is this big wave of interest in Egypt, and ancient Egypt in particular. And so, the idea for this pyramid, which I'm a tad familiar with, I've heard it before, comes from that Egyptomania, right? They say, all right, well, the Egyptians used these ancient pyramids. Why don't we build a gigantic pyramid in the middle of London and we can bury all of our dead people in it? Now, might sound a little strange today, but that was the idea.
Serving as a nice little reminder in the sky of your impending doom, in case the air wasn't enough. While most plans featured in this video are rather ridiculous, the Death Pyramid actually wasn't that crazy of an idea. With a capacity of 5 million, it would have stored an equivalent of 1,000 acres of traditional cemetery land. To add to its practicality, the summit was to be used as an astronomical observatory, because all the best research is fueled by the screams of the damned. And what did Wilson plan to do if the pyramid got full? Just build a new one, because he got 3. But
yeah, the idea was, if the pyramid fills up, build some more. And so, I suppose Wilson's vision of London eventually would have been this city that was filled with these massive pyramids packed with millions of dead people. It's definitely a different vision for London than what we actually saw play out.
like all fun things in life, public opinion saw the downfall of the Death Pyramid. This could have something to do with the fact that Wilson claimed, "It will teach the living to die and the dying to live forever." But I think Industrial Revolution London already had that lesson down.
Yeah.
Furthermore, there were concerns that the sheer weight of the thing would literally crush Primrose Hill. We all know how Londoners like their curves. Ultimately, people preferred a wild and free Primrose Hill, with the opening of multiple garden cemeteries on London's countryside being the final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, and this is actually a big moment in sort of the history of burying people, I guess you could say. If you're looking at the UK, like I said, up until this point, most of the people were still buried in these old churchyards. But around the mid-19th century, mid-1800s, what you see is, well, we've got a lot more people packed into these places. We need places to bury them. And instead of the pyramid, what they go for are these green cemeteries. So these wide open cemeteries that are also used as parks. You know, of course, people go to them to visit their loved ones, but they also go just to walk around, right? So there's sort of these multi-purpose spaces, and these begin to really take off in the UK and then in other places. In the United States, for example, you go from, once again, a lot of these old churchyards, whether for Quakers, Puritans, Catholics, you've got these different denominations, to a lot of these big open cemeteries that are a lot more general, can also serve as big green spaces and parks. There's also a more general movement towards this during the era. You know, people want green space as smog is clouding up their cities. Now, frankly, they're not going to get a lot of that green space for kind of many decades to come, but it is something that people do want. And so, you know, this is sort of, like I said, a moment in the evolution of graveyards and cemeteries. The sort of invention of the modern cemetery in some ways.
So unfortunately, the Park Cemetery beat out the Death Pyramid as the go-to burial method. But could you imagine? "Mother, I miss Grandpappy." "Don't you worry, James. Your grandfather will always be watching over you."
Literally.
In the modern era, many strides have been made towards improving the lives and rights of the LGBT community, resulting in more acceptance of homosexuality in today's culture than ever before. And as with all things, this left the US government with one pressing question. But can we weaponize it? In 1994, researchers at Air Force's Wright Laboratory in Ohio set out to do just that, exploring the potential for a gay bomb. No, not the
This is one that the internet loves, so I've heard this one before.
fun kind. We're talking
psychochemical warfare.
In a 3-page proposal to the Department of Defense, they described how the bomb would disperse a gas over enemy camps that would, quote, "cause enemy soldiers to become gay and to have their units break down because all their soldiers became irresistibly attractive to one another." Basically,
What a crazy idea. You know, there are a lot of crazy ideas from the United States government during this era. I mean, at this point, we're post-Cold War, but during the 20th century, probably a lot of crazy ideas today. We just don't know about them yet. And these ideas range from the more ridiculous ones, of which this is one of those, to, frankly, the more realistic and nefarious ones that often the CIA actually did or tried to do. So there's a lot of these wacky types of plans. This is one of the wackier ones.
Basically, the idea was to help the enemy combatants make love, not war. So we can make war. The document acknowledged that no such chemical existed at that point, but promised further research into the little explored world of pheromones and aphrodisiacs should their $7.5 million proposal get approved. The basis for the idea seems to have originated from how copulants were marketed as aphrodisiacs in perfumes and colognes since the 70s, but that remains more in the realm of pseudoscience, seeing as how the claim was based on just some observations of monkey behavior, not quite the definition of a serious or controlled scientific study.
Yeah, this is more of a theoretical one. Like I said, you look at these government plans, sometimes from the Defense Department, sometimes FBI, often from the CIA, and there's a lot of really weird plans, but a lot of them do stay theoretical only on paper, which means it wasn't ever really that close to happening, or even them trying to make it happen. But there are a lot of examples of plans that they did try, and often didn't work, but they tried them. MK Ultra, for example, the CIA did a lot of nefarious stuff throughout the 20th century and onwards, right? And like I said, sometimes it remained on paper. Most times it remained on paper, especially with the wackiest ideas, but sometimes it was put into practice.
Regardless, the proposal made its way to the Pentagon, and I like to imagine it went a little something like this. Okay, Corporal, what do you got for me? Proposal for a new nuclear warhead that maximizes radiation damage to farmland. About time, push it forward. The Army wants to weaponize honeybees in Iraq, so they... Yeah, sure, fine. Wright Laboratory gave us this proposal for a gay bomb that... Corporal, are you mad? We are the United States of America, for Christ's sake. It is our duty as the leaders of the free world to draw the line on what is just and inhumane. Understood, Major. Consider it scrapped. The FBI think they can overthrow Castro using child sleeper agents and doped up spinner dolphins. How fast can they have it done? The Department of Defense scrapped the proposal pretty quickly, and the gay bomb never saw any real development. But I mean, come on. The idea was pretty ridiculous. There's nothing that can just turn any man gay. It's the early 1920s, and America's having a roaring time. They got jazz, that one Fortnite dance, and a stock market that could never get depressing. The Great War may be over, but a great age has just begun. Right, Europe? Oh, right, the war happened here. Spare any change? Ew. Unlike the...
Yeah, they were not having such a great time. I mean, it varied somewhat from country to country, but generally, most of Europe in the 1920s, especially the early 20s, they were in a deep recovery from the First World War, and sometimes that recovery was not going so well. Of course, even when the 1920s was going well, later in the 20s, or in places like the US, that was sort of a facade covering up, well, what was going to be a massive economic crash. Well, glad we're in the 20s again, the 2020s, and they seem to be going just swimmingly. Anyway, talking about the 1920s here.
The US, the years immediately following World War I didn't prove fruitful for much of Europe. The continent was experiencing a sharp rise in unemployment, overpopulation, and a looming energy crisis. Noting these issues, German architect Hermann Zorgel sought to kill multiple government drones with one stone, using his continent-uniting project, Atlantropa. Now, I know what you're thinking, and no, unfortunately, Atlantropa wasn't a plan for a massive Atlantis-themed water park. In fact, quite the opposite. Instead of a large influx of water, the project called for the draining of water.
Yep.
A lot of water. Like a sea's worth. Specifically, Zorgel wanted to partially drain the Mediterranean Sea by building a series of dams. The Mediterranean is naturally evaporative, with water flowing in from the Atlantic. A dam across the Strait of Gibraltar would naturally lower the sea level over time, and Zorgel planned to drop it by up to 200 meters.
It's crazy to me that he wanted to do this, and also that he thought this would solve the problems they were facing. I really don't think it would have, just given the fact, sure, you've got some more land, but you're going to have to do something with that land. Of course, the idea never came close to actually happening, but this man literally wanted to dam up the Mediterranean, and all these beautiful coastal cities you have throughout the Mediterranean would now be deep inland. What, just not a good idea on multiple different levels. Of course, not realistic, but even if it was, not a good idea.
Creating over 660,000 square kilometers of new land for living space. Europe and Africa would unite into a new supercontinent, with all its energy needs being met by the new dam, the construction of which would provide the unemployed masses.
Probably the one correctly oriented part of this which was, all right, we're building these dams. They're going to provide us electricity and jobs. Like, all right, I understand that. But maybe do something like these other dams we're seeing here, not this insane mega project.
With the work for decades. The plan initially saw a lot of support from the German public, but not so much so from countries actually on the Mediterranean.
Exactly.
This could have something to do with the fact that the
Right. So most of these countries actually on the Mediterranean saw the issues and were like, we do not want to do this. And of course, the Germans were looking for Lebensraum, living space. We know how that turned out.
fishing villages weren't all that keen on becoming mountain ones.
Right.
And places like Venice would pretty much lose their entire identity. But come on, ocean views are overrated. Things are great in Germany. Africa wasn't a fan either. Something about giving Europeans easier access to their lands didn't quite sit right with them. But their opinion mattered about as much as a post on Apple's feedback page. Yeah, basically we'd merge together as one continent, and we could build railroads to you guys, making travel extremely convenient. What do you think?
أخشى عليه من الجبل طال غيابه هذه المرة.
I know, great, right? Say, how much concrete do you have? Zorgel later pitched the
Uh-oh.
project to the Nazis after they took over, noting
Unsurprising.
their desire for living space, but they weren't all that interested in the plan. Damn, why bother creating new land when there is all this land nobody is using?
Yeah, I mean, the Nazis, they were interested in a lot of insane, out there plans. I mean, you can read about what some of these top Nazi officials were interested in, right? I mean, they had a lot of very strange, mystic beliefs, strange, almost sci fi beliefs. They were not this might seem obvious, not a logical bunch. Of course, beyond the, blatant and horrific anti Semitism, also the science and the mysticism and all that was very strange. But I guess even they were not interested in this project because, like he's about to point out, they were looking for their Lebensraum or living space elsewhere.
Interested in the plan. Damn, why bother creating new land when there is all this land nobody is using? What? Of course, Atlantropa had a few small issues that needed some ironing out, such as catastrophic effects on climate, the mass extinction of Mediterranean marine life, and the lack of enough concrete in the world at the time to actually construct the thing. Oh, and there's
This was never even close to happening.
the small fact that the homes of millions and the power of an entire continent were solely subject to the proper operation of a single dam holding back a literal ocean.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the catastrophe if the squirrel from Ice Age stumbled upon it? Zorgo continued to promote his project until his death in 1952, with his beloved Atlantropa losing all its steam with him. But hey, now that the name is open for the taking, I say we try that water park idea. I actually went ahead and took a crack at the design. It's themed after the movie Atlantis the Lost Empire, which features dynamite-wielding Italians, making it objectively the best animated Disney movie.
I mean, that's definitely a more fun idea. A big Mediterranean spanning water park. Now, everyone will be on board with that. That's a lot better than the whole Atlantropa thing.
I'm thinking we can build a thing in Poland because God knows they deserve a break. If a colossal water park can't line up a place that depressing, I don't know what will. Perhaps a gay bomb. Yeah, 10 stars.
Alrighty, well, there we go. That was a BlueJay reaction. Craziest projects that were almost a reality. I would say asterisk on the almost a reality. The pyramid, that one was the closest to actually being a reality. Now, it still wasn't like super close to implementation, but it was a realistic plan, whatever issues you have with it, and I do have issues. It was a realistic plan that could have happened, just didn't. The other plans we saw, not very realistic, right? Like the gay bomb only really existed on paper. And Atlantropa, though maybe, desired among some people at that time, was never really going to happen. First of all, the amount of cooperation you would have needed from all these different countries, no. And also, beyond that, the amount of resources it would have taken, it just was not going to happen. So, craziest projects that were considered at some point by some people, and some of them were almost a reality. Definitely an interesting video. I believe it's our second BlueJay reaction. I know we've done at least one on the channel before. Sort of a very salmonella type vibe, as I said in the beginning. So if you guys enjoyed this one, you can leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and check out my Patreon, which is linked down below. I'd really appreciate that. So I hope you guys are all having a great day today, and I'll see you all again next time. Goodbye.